Are we going to be speaking about niceties and romance and things of that nature during this transmission of the Living Word live stream on this St. Valentine's Day?
Yes,
Absolutely not.
Oh, we're not?
Absolutely not. That's not our style. We don't go according to the trends. We don't go according to the expectations. We basically go according to the rhythm of our own drum beat. And some would say, and what drum rhythm is that? The most complicated one that is practically very difficult to understand. Welcome each and every one of you to this new edition of the Living Word live stream. Once again, your hosts presenting this edition's topic for our audience. My name is Gio, and that is my father, Jesus.
Known as Cupid.
Started off on a good foot this edition, folks. Well, as the title suggests, and not only suggests it, it actually implies it very strongly, we're going to be talking about learning the value of things. Now, this is, I think...
So you don't value Cupid?
No, nothing whatsoever. Although, there are some people who say, because I still remember, and I know you still remember this, there were some Christians that go around saying, hey, be careful with those little angels with wings with the bow and arrow because they're nudists.
And they were all fat.
They were all fat. You're right. But what was it about the curly hair?
Childhood diabetes, maybe. Maybe, I'm just saying. Remember Jesse Duplantis? He said he was taken to heaven in a vision, and he saw little human beings flying around saying to God, Father, send me to the earth so I could be redeemed. So I ask you, you're in heaven, you're saved, or you've never known sin. Why would you want to come down here?
I don't understand that, frankly. I don't quite understand. But you see, these are the bridges that we open to other topics that the audience says. These two, when they go on a stream of consciousness, is rather interesting. You just said that these cupids were diabetic. Could it be that the arrows in those outstretched bows were in fact insulin shots?
Could be.
That they were sending to each other. Those are the curiosities.
That's a little metformin there for you.
That's right. Take an insulin shot so you can live a little longer. What we'd like to talk about tonight is learning the value of things. Now, the fact of the matter is, Dad, that I think if you were to ask most people, they would say, I think I'm pretty well versed on knowing the value of all things.
And then you see their life.
And then you see their life and you understand that they truly don't know how to value things and we're going to go to texts in the Bible that teach us that, in fact, that's something that has to be learned. It's not something that we have to automatically adopt, or it's innate within us.
And that's a great point, because you can learn one of two ways. Either you learn it from your parents, God, the Bible, or you take the hits.
Sure. But even then, and it's not to contradict what you're saying, but even then, there are people that take the hits and they just can't seem to quite learn the lesson.
So that means...
Do they need an insulin shot?
In the regular school, they had issues.
Correct.
And in the school of life, they also can't get the passing grades.
Well, let me use an example. Today I was listening to a lady who calls herself a life coach. These self-styled experts on all things, that it seems like they had to go through 10,000 failures in order to learn things so that they can teach other people how not to fail. Anyways, that's a curious thing in and of itself, that phenomenon. But she was being interviewed by someone else, and she says that she considers herself to be a pretty smart person, but that as it pertained to men, she couldn't quite ever learn the lesson, and didn't learn the lesson of submissiveness until around age 42 or 43. So then you ask yourself, did she just gloss over the part of the text where it says, wives, submit to your husbands as you submit unto the Lord? Because it's very clearly written, and all you have to do is adopt it and put it into practice to start practically using biblical wisdom in some way, shape, or form.
And who is her coach?
She said that the Knox of life. That's why I mentioned, I use it. I'm piggybacking off of what you said earlier.
Okay, because you have these coaches, and then you ask them, who is your coach? I don't need a coach. Remember the kid you had in youth group that the teacher told him just about everybody needs psychological help, and you gave him a good piece of advice?
I said, go back to the teacher and ask her what are her particular mental issues that she has to grapple with. And the answer she gave him when he asked her that was, well, not everybody comes to us with mental issues.
So she doesn't need help. Everybody else but her. And it's the same thing with the coaches. You guys need coaching. We coaches, we don't need coaching.
Exactly. But then talking about the value of things, because I know some people are asking, how is this relevant to the topic? Well, if you necessarily value discernment, then you're not going to be taken. You would see through the folly of what these so-called experts, they teach and what they put out, and you can recognize it for what it inherently is. But therein lies the problem. To your point, I think we need adequate teachers. We need to understand that someone needs to teach us the actual value of things, because that's another point that, and I know we're going to talk about it a bit more, but I guess now it bears saying it. People will tell you, I understand the value of things, but values, as it were, can be misjudged as well.
So why is it that common sense is no longer valued, at least properly, held in high esteem?
Good point.
Because this is the reason why many people look for coaches. The first lie they buy is, listen, you don't really have common sense. That's not really that good of a tool, so you need us. Once you buy that, you have started to manifest that you're not properly trained in valuing things.
Sure.
Because common sense is extremely important.
Well, so important that we can see the effects of not abiding by it. What do I mean by this? Something can be hitting you in the face, figuratively speaking.
Mhm.
You can see it with your own eyes. You
Right.
can sense it.
Right.
You can hear it.
Yeah.
And then you still insist because someone else tells you that's not what you're seeing. They're right. I'm not seeing what I'm seeing. I'm not hearing what I'm
It's
hearing.
part of your lying eyes syndrome.
Exactly right.
Yep.
And folks, this is extremely important because from the very beginning, I mean, I don't know how many times I've heard you say this, and it continues to be true because it's based on absolute biblical truth. Genesis is the foundation for absolutely everything, even in our consideration for this topic. Some would
Yes.
say, how is that relevant? Among the first words that we hear God proclaim after he creates everything is, it is good. It is good. He saw that his creation was good and he said, it is good.
And he tested Adam and Eve. Of course, one of you might ask, what do you mean he tested them? Here are the animals, name them.
Yep.
He did a good job. So even in that piece of information that the book of Genesis gives us, we see the value of correctly valuing things.
But that's the thing. Then the converse of it is good would be what? This is no good. I know some would say, Jew, you're very close to blaspheming because God can't create something that is necessarily inferior. I would have to disagree with that assessment, because now we're basically saying that God is incapable of these things. And to me, God's character is even greater, knowing that he is absolutely detailed in absolutely everything that he does, and he doesn't leave anything to chance. This is one of the reasons that Jesus, for example, says that every vain word that man speaks, he will give an account for on the day of judgment. And God himself, there's another text here. If I'm not, man, I thought I had it written in the notes, but there's a particular text in the Old Testament. Now it escapes me. I think it's in Proverbs where he says, God does not speak any vain words. So when we're talking about the value of things, the ultimate value giver, the ultimate creator, he knows the values of things because he knows what is actually valuable, what is profitable compared to that which is useless.
Yeah, once we read in the Bible that God gave or put his seal of approval on his creation, we see God himself examining, considering, and saying, this is good.
And the lesson for us to learn from that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there in Genesis. And like you said, I've said it now for decades, you need to know the book of Genesis. It's foundational.
But then the question is, since we're talking about learning the value of things, you mentioned a few things earlier. Let's talk about some of those. You said, okay, the things that our parents teach us. What if the things that our parents teach us are not valuable in themselves because our parents have been informed by, let's say, the secular world to value things that are of no inherent value?
Well, the problem, the solution are still there. You have to go back to where that line of transferring values was damaged. So you can take it back to your parents, your grandparents, great-grandparents, but somebody messed up along the way, and this generation is messing up like all the time.
Sure.
But I see in the Bible, from the New Testament all the way to the end of the New Testament, from the Old all the way through to the New Testament, I see God making parents responsible for teaching kids values and teaching them how to value things.
Well, among the first things that you begin to see that God honors Abraham for is that he will teach his children and subsequent generations to keep my word, to meditate on my word, to live according to it, etc.
Value your relationship with God.
Exactly.
Value your relationship with your parents, and so on and so forth.
So then my question to you is, and I'm going to ask you just a question to evaluate my evaluation of learning how to value things. I've put here in our notes the
Because
following.
you will take care of the things you value.
Right.
Now, if your value system is damaged, you're going to take care of things that are worthless.
Exactly.
But if it's good, you're going to take care of things that are priceless.
So then can we say can I say satisfactorily, and biblically would it be correct to say that the way that because the question now is going to be asked, okay, so then how do I know how to value something, what something's inherent value is? And of course, the Christian answer, the biblical answer would be, well, Christ, God, lets you know the inherent value of things.
Because you're not the source of this information. You are not the source of this wisdom. It's God himself. And this is where people make the mistake. Many people make the mistake thinking that they are the source. Once you disconnect from God, you start making choices, choosing things that destroy your soul. And that tells you what? You don't value your soul. So Jesus says, if you earn the totality of the world, but you lose your soul, what have you really gained? You've lost.
Yeah.
Even though people could be celebrating you and giving you awards and, standing ovations, you have actually lost.
So then is this, what you're mentioning now, is this one of the manifestations that we hear from some people where when they enunciate their opinion, because you can tell on their words, their opinion is equivalent to being based, as it were, on truth. And then when you examine their claims, you understand that it's so far away from the truth that in reality, they've actually self-deceived themselves. But you see that a lot of people, they hold their opinion in such high esteem as if it were gospel in these things. Is that a symptom of what you just mentioned, where you're deceived as it pertains to what you necessarily value?
Absolutely. Here's another one. A lot of young people will tell you, I do my own thing. And you take a close look at what they're doing, they're just repeating what they see others doing.
Sure.
But they have made themselves believe that they are doing their own thing. So you see that they bought into the lie somewhere, and they're damaging their soul, which means that they don't value their soul. Your soul is so important. Your inner man is so important. If you don't value that, then you're going to let it fall apart, if you will, be damaged, more corrupt. And I'm talking about sinners now, because believers have been regenerated by the power of the Holy Spirit. But sinners will just go on that slippery slope to the point that their soul is hardened.
Yeah.
Their conscience is no longer working or minimally working. And so the new birth gets you on the right track, but you have to follow up on that. And this is why Paul, in his letters to the letter to the Romans, in Romans 12:1 and 12:2, talks about the renewing of the mind, how important it is to renew the mind. So if you don't go through the process, and this is what you called it, or a teaching, then it's not going to happen for you.
So then what we're saying here is that as sinners, birthed into sin, we're obviously going to be contaminated in some way, shape, or form with valuing things that are of no inherent value, because the secular world, that's parcel of what it does. It puts out, it tells you this is necessarily the most valuable thing. I'm probably going to destroy this particular phrase, but it's a paraphrase of something that I heard not too long ago. Sin is the very thing that promises you the world and actually leaves you indebted with your life to it for the rest of existence in perdition. Why do I say all of that? Well, because necessarily then, in order for you to follow sin down to perdition, you have to inherently value what sin tells you that you ought to value, when in fact, the Bible calls it vanity. The Bible calls it emptiness. It calls it nothingness. It's just, it gives you perdition. It doesn't actually leave you with anything of, and here's the word I wanted to get to, profit. It doesn't leave you with anything of a profit.
The thing with all of this, Gio, as I see it, as I understand it, is here you are, here I am, here we are using the word value. And people will go into the book of Genesis and read it 3 times and conclude these two are wrong. I see nothing there. There are no X amount of times that the Bible uses the word value. They don't seem to understand that you must extract the spiritual content from what is written in Genesis, Exodus, etc.
Yep.
And it's not that you're trying to read between the lines, but there is information between the lines. And so once you read a few verses, once you read a chapter, you ask yourself, what am I to glean from this?
Right.
And one of the things that we glean from the very beginning is that God values things.
Yeah.
And we should value things, mostly or firstly spiritual things. But if you go into the simple Bible study, let me see how many times the book of Genesis uses the word value. Oh, it's not there. These two don't know what they're talking about. And yet we have started to quote from the book of Genesis, and we can quote more how the value system and how learning how to value things properly is vital. Because once Adam and Eve, once they fell, now it's a matter of learning. You have to learn how to value things. Otherwise, you're going to go with the inclination of the flesh, the old man, the sinful nature. You're in trouble.
Well, I'm going to take you up on the challenge. One of the very first things that we see that God values and he tells us to value is loyalty.
Yes.
I mean, you see that in Genesis, to your point. There's so many things that you can extract from Genesis where you inherently see. But that, Pops, how many times have we talked about this? Christians have been taught to read their Bible religiously. I know. It's a theme that we've talked about over, and some people will say, there you go again. You seem to be talking about it again. But what they can't seem to understand, what a lot of people that criticize us for maybe being redundant on these things don't understand, is that if you are able to divorce yourself from that religious mentality, then that's where you begin to take maximum advantage from what the Bible has to teach. Until you take off those blinders, then you're not going to be able to see the things that, for example, the Bible very clearly talks about and that we're expounding on, until you take off those blinders. Like, for example, taking these texts that we see in Genesis and extrapolating these very concepts, these principles that we see delineated in the text.
One of the things you must do to accomplish this, that Gio was explaining, is get your eyes away from the packaging. This world exalts packaging. And when you read the Bible carefully, you see that packaging is insignificant.
Man, what is it? Man judges according to appearance, but God judges according to the heart.
There you go. If you could travel using a time machine back to the Exodus, and if you were to stand from a distance and take a look at the tabernacle, you would go like, wow, this is like an early version of the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey circus. What is that thing out there? Just a collection of pieces of leather, and they were dyed and all that. It wasn't that pleasing to the eye. The packaging was not really something that would draw you.
Sure.
But if you take a look on the inside,
Exactly.
wow, it's beautiful. The
The
Holy of
gold, the
Holies.
artwork, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
And you can move that all the way to Jesus. There is nothing in the natural eyesight that would tell you, yeah, go ahead and follow this man.
Yeah.
Especially at Golgotha. I thought this guy was the king of the Jews. Didn't he go around healing the sick and raising the dead? What's up with this now? Look at him, crucified to a piece of wood there. But inside all the time, he was showing you the Holy of Holies. He was bringing to us the wisdom of God. He was teaching us how to value things. I mean, Jesus was all over. I mean, just all over this topic that God has placed in your heart for tonight. And if we pay attention to his words, thinking that or understanding that he's teaching us how to value things, then we extract so much from his teachings, at least a lot more than we have extracted so far, because most of what people extract is religious rituals. And if I do this every night, if I do this every morning, then I'm okay. They don't extract what is coming from the inside of our Lord, and it's supposed to go in your inside.
Very interesting
in the
thing.
inner man.
Very interesting thing that you say this, because the general idea of what you just mentioned, the spirit of the very thing you just mentioned, Peter mentions it. The cornerstone, the chief cornerstone that the builders rejected, that the founders rejected,
Yes.
he has become a precious thing to us believers. I'm paraphrasing there, but that's to your point. And that text in and of itself that Peter mentions is alluding to the general topic that we're talking about tonight, because Christians, when we value things that the world doesn't value, the world tends to think, why are you valuing those things? Because they're insignificant, of course, because the world doesn't know how to value. But if God teaches you how to value the proper things, it's going to seem like lunacy to the world, but you're actually going to value the things that are among them intangible. We mentioned one earlier that is seen from Genesis, loyalty. Look at, these are the things that when you begin to take a step back and analyze society and its behaviors and its inclinations and its thought about the things, you begin to see that society is really cancerous in its spiritual inclination. I'll give one example. In our country and in other countries right now, you've got people whom are openly betraying their fellow countrymen, openly betraying their oath of office, openly betraying their country. And it doesn't seem like it bothers very many people too many things. Why? Because a culture that doesn't value, for example, honesty and loyalty and patriotism, those things are absolutely insignificant to them, even though those intangibles, so to speak, are the things that carry a nation and make it great and make it move forward and become a beacon of light to other nations. You see this sort of thing with Israel and how God wanted to make Israel a light among the nations. But what happened when they wanted to say, we want to be like the rest of the nations, we want to have a king over us, et cetera, et cetera. They just wanted to be one of the rest when God actually wanted to make them, again, use the intangibles to make them a shining light to the rest of the world.
If you ask a group of 100 people living here in the United States, a diverse group, is voting valuable? They will all tell you yes. Then we would ask them, give us evidence that would lead us to believe that you truly believe what you have just said.
Yep.
What kind of evidence are you looking for? Well, do you know the Constitution? Do you know the ways of this country? Well, no, but it doesn't take away from the fact that I value the boat. If you value the boat, then you would be informed as to how you should proceed as a citizen. The people that have the boat now shouldn't just be giving it away to anybody.
Yep.
Because we understand that this is the way that, at least for this system, this is set up, and this is the way we can protect it. I had a young man on one occasion ask me, how can I find a good woman, a good wife? And my answer was simple. You must first become a good man.
Yeah.
You cannot value beyond your own worth and value, so you must bring your worth and your value up.
Which works on your sensibilities.
Exactly, and your discernment and your wisdom. So how can you tell that woman is great, fantastic, extraordinary if you're not?
Exactly. I completely agreed.
And
if your value system isn't what it should be.
And once it is, then you're going to see the need to work on yourself and become a better man so you can be a better husband, a better father, so on and so forth.
Exactly. There's a text here that we want to read for the audience, which serves also as foundational for what we've been talking about up until this point. You'll find in the first book of Samuel, chapter number 12. Now, I'm going to read the context so that the audience can understand where this comes from, even though we could read the text we've highlighted by itself, but we want to read the context also so that it gives more light in light of what we're talking about tonight. Verse 20, it says, Then Samuel said to the people, Do not fear. You have done all this wickedness, yet do not turn aside from following the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart. Remember, the context here is that Israel is still under a system of judges, even though even at this point in their history, there had been various disobediences. And if I'm not mistaken, at the beginning of the book of Samuel, it says that during the time when Eli was high priest in a certain part of Israel and Samuel was up and coming, it says that there was no open, I think in the King James Version, it says that there was no open vision. It seems like God had not spoken, as it were, through any prophets up until that particular point, or through the judges to Israel. And then Samuel is raised up by God.
Yeah, in the book of Judges, it talks about anarchy.
Exactly, there was.
Over and over.
And they were just moving from, it's funny, in the book of Judges, God help us. He sends a judge. There's a period of respite and obedience, back to disobedience. God help us. Back to, and it's a cycle that repeats
a couple times
over.
In the book of Judges. It basically says that people did whatever they wanted to do,
exactly,
whatever they felt like doing.
Exactly. So then we have a situation now where God, as it were, is helping his people out. And what's the first thing they say to God? We want to be like the other nations. We want to be like the other nations. We want a king over to judge us, it says. I find that very curious because among God's first words to Samuel, when Samuel is absolutely disturbed to hear this, he says, they haven't rejected you. They've rejected me. There's an inherent value system there that God is alluding to when he says they are not rejecting you. They're rejecting me. In other words, when they are openly saying we want men to judge us, and then Samuel says he's going to take away your children, he's going to make them servants, he's going to take away 1/10 of your sheep, he's going to take your lands, etc., etc., etc. They still insist, we want a king over us. They rejected God. It seems like fealty wasn't in Israel's mind, and they paid dearly for it. So this is the context. He says, do not fear. You have all done this wickedness, yet do not turn aside from following the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart. Which, by the way, let's put it this way, Saul he left a lot to be desired as a monarch, and that's putting it lightly. Here's the verse we wanted to highlight, verse 21. And do not turn aside, for then you would go after empty things which cannot profit or deliver, for they are nothing. That's the New King James Version. I have a couple of other versions I want to read for the audience, because I said earlier that when we ask the question, how can we know that we inherently valuing the correct thing correctly? I happen to think, and that's why I was asking you earlier, if profit, biblical profit, is a good way, and now we're not talking about prophesying, but profit as in profit, Profit. What profit can you gain from it, spiritually speaking, even in other terms? King James Version, it says, and turn ye not aside, for then should ye go after vain things, which cannot profit nor deliver, for they are vain. Here's the NASB, the New American Standard Bible. Indeed, you must not turn aside, for then you would go after useless things, which cannot benefit or save, because they are useless. So just from the implication of the text, Dad, I'm seeing a few things here. Samuel is saying to the people, and we have to learn this lesson, unless you're attached to God and God teaches you what to value, how to value it, you're going to go to things that the world tells you are valuable, but inherently they're absolutely useless.
Well, Satan will also tell you what to value. I was holding a conversation with a couple today, and they were talking about the greatness of a cashless society. So that dropped 25 cents in my jukebox, and we were ready to have a conversation. And I said, so what about privacy? Well, yeah, we get that argument, but, this way you stop all the stealing. And I bring it back to your point. If we had a proper value system inculcated, taught, established in the mind and the heart, the soul of our citizens, we wouldn't have a problem with people going around stealing,
Sure.
and you could still keep your privacy.
Exactly.
Now we find out that the government is using certain agencies to see if you're buying in these particular stores, because if they are, you are persona non grata.
Exactly.
And so the point is, it's obvious that these people have been brainwashed by this other value system, which in reality is not a value system. It devalues or takes away from your eyesight true things that are valuable, in this case, your privacy, and it turns you over into this other mentality where valuable things are cast away, the vote, privacy, because you follow the logic, which is not really logical, of this world. You follow the current of this world. Next thing you know, you're trapped in it, and now you can't even see when somebody's holding a conversation with you, having a conversation with you, the important things that are being shown.
Yeah.
That somebody is conveying to you, they can't see it.
Well, in your example, if I can continue to use it, notice that these are the very same people that Benjamin Franklin warned against. What do I mean by that? Those whom are willing to trade liberty for some safety deserve neither liberty nor safety, because in their minds, the primary thing is safety. What they don't understand is that whenever you turn that over to any entity, whether it be government or whatnot, you're basically handing over on a platter, so to speak, liberty. So it's funny you mentioned that, because frankly, it irks me. I have to admit, it irks me when I hear people say things like, yeah, I get that argument. It's a dismissive way of basically saying that the concerns that you're bringing up, which is a very legitimate concern, the issue of privacy, to use your example, they simply dismiss it. In reality, they haven't considered it because they don't want to consider it because, again, going back to what we mentioned earlier, in their minds, their opinion is based on absolute truth, when the fact of the matter is that they actually haven't let truth guide them to an opinion that is actually based on fact, or more so on truth.
Look at the way women march, basically saying, no, I don't think this child that's inside me is valuable. I don't consider valuable the fact that I can protect with my body this human that is coming along, that is being shaped inside me. I don't consider these things valuable. Valuable? My career is valuable. And we're not saying your career is not valuable, but it's not as valuable as the child you're carrying. There's an interesting piece of recording out I want to see if I can get the totality of the audio. Where supposedly I only heard a couple of pieces. The kicker for the Chiefs was talking about certain advice he was giving a group that he was speaking to. He said, "Get yourself married, start a family. This is the best piece of advice that I can give you." And I thought, wow, this is refreshing.
Oh, it's not date a billionaire starlet who is just absolutely crazy. Anyways, everybody knows where I'm going with that.
And then you can see the difference between what this guy is saying. He's getting no press coverage.
Of course not.
Kelsey's taking all
Absolutely.
the oxygen. You hear Kelsey speaking, and you go like, I would not want I don't want my kids listening to this guy.
I agree. I completely agree.
But then again, the truth is that most kids are listening to this guy.
And they're in, I don't know how many times you've told me throughout the years, and it's an advice that I continue to give the audience because it's served me well. It's profited me, to use that term again. You've told me over and over again, make sure that you pay particular attention to example of what you find in the Proverbs. Because especially towards the first half of Proverbs, it's a father giving advice to his son. Be careful with this, be careful with the other thing. And then my daughter was asking me the other day, Dad, how would you describe the Proverbs? I said, well, simple sayings when you unpack them, basically simple sayings that when you unpack them, there's a lot of information there.
That's right.
That's the basic way to do it. And the
zip file.
Exactly. Proverbs talks a lot. I mean, there's just plenty of verses that talks about the useless man, about the man who speaks vanities, about the person who is wise according to their own opinion. There are so many texts in Proverbs that warn you against that, talking about value. But to your point, what is it that this society values? The things which are inherently useless. And the advice that we give our audience for this edition of the live stream is you need to be tuned to God, so to speak, because he teaches you what to value, how to value, and it's going to stand in stark contrast to what the world is telling you to value. And you have to make that decision for yourself. We can't make it for you. That's just the simple matter of the fact. But if you take God's word and you believe him, then guess what? God is going to honor you like he honored the saints that we see in the text, and it will go better for you. I mean, this is where you get the Psalms, for example, that he shall be like a tree that is planted by the waters, et cetera, et cetera. But those promises are there for the people who actually take God at his word, and they allow him to inform them what needs to be seen as valuable.
I wrote a small piece. I'll probably publish it within the next few days, talking about something that we all, every now and then, need, and that is help from our neighbor, from our fellow man. If you are to do this, if you're going to need help from your fellow man, look for the wise and generous person. Approach that person, and out of his generosity, he will share wisdom with you, and it'll last you a lifetime. Most people, when they think they need help from their fellow man, they'll go like, this guy is sitting pretty. Let me get his help, his generosity.
Yep.
He can only help you so much, even if he is very or she is very generous. But if you think beyond those terms, if you can see beyond those initial ideas that you'll get or that you have received from the world and from programs and films and so on and so forth, then you will see the importance of, if I am to reach out to my neighbor, to my fellow man, let me tap my neighbor who is wise. Let me tap his generosity. Because now you're setting yourself up for life, to enjoy life, and not just to resolve a financial, a monetary issue that could be burdening you and troubling you. And I get that. But if you are needing help from your neighbor, go for the generosity of your neighbor who is wise and is knowledgeable. It may take you a little longer to see your way out of this situation you are in, but a couple of things will happen. You will get out of that, and two, you will not find yourself in that ditch again, because you will have learned how you got there and how to avoid it.
Absolutely. Folks, we want to invite you that if you're in the South Florida area, that you would join us for the next in-person meeting that Living Word is having. We're going to be meeting at Mary Abreu Community Center at Tropical Park this Sunday, and the meeting starts at 10:30 a.m. we're going to talk about a subject that is directly correlated to what we've talked about during this evening. We're specifically going to talk about frustration versus satisfaction. This is something that, again, it's directly correlated to what we're talking about this evening, because there's an awful lot of experts out there that will teach you, supposedly, how to achieve satisfaction in living, and yet you find tons and tons of people. There's a heap of persons that have followed that advice, and they still say that they can't find any satisfaction, a la Mick Jagger, so to speak.
That's
right?
exactly where they end up. I can't get satisfaction.
Can't get satisfaction. And the question is, why is it? Well, Christians, since we are speaking to Christians in particular, unfortunately, they follow a lot of this advice, and they end up in the same garbage heap that the world ends up, because they don't understand that the advice that they're receiving inherently doesn't lead anywhere but to a place of destruction. So then, as Christians, how do we achieve satisfaction? Because let's face it, the Bible does talk about fulfillment. The Bible does talk about satisfaction. The Bible talks about peace. The Bible talks about tranquility. How do we achieve those things that are all an integral part of the Christian living? Well, we'll give you a preview of what we're going to talk about on Sunday. Specifically, it is this, tying into what we're talking about tonight. If you begin to use God's value system in the way that you are in the world, in the way that you behave in the world, then you're on your way to achieving what is godly satisfaction. But if there's a lot of counterfeits out there. So that's part of what we're going to talk about on Sunday, and we hope that you'll join us. Again, Mary Abreu Community Center, that's at Tropical Park in Miami, Florida. You can find the address online. We begin that meeting at 10:30 a.m. We also invite the audience that to give us your donations. I know it sounds very brusque to say it that way, but we need your help economically. It is the way that we can put out this content to edify the audience. You'll find that there is a link underneath the video player. Simply click on it. We're currently using PayPal services to process those patronages and donations. Please do so. And through this way, you'll help us to continue putting out this content for your edification. Also, if you have not done so, subscribe to our Telegram channel. The username is beneath. And we also have a great update for our audience. We are finishing up with respect to the website. We've been promising that to the audience. Now, we're currently going to use Substack's services. I know many of you know what Substack is. Substack is a great service in that it does two things. Whenever we post content, if you're subscribed to our Substack, you'll automatically receive emails letting you know, alerting you that we've published all of this, whatever it is that we publish, whether it be articles, whether it be videos, whether it be podcasts for your edification. You will automatically be alerted. So pretty soon we'll give that address once the website is completed, and it's completely free, by the way. And soon enough, what we're going to do is that we're going to open up a paywall for a particular segment of the audience that wants to support us, and we're going to give subscriber exclusive content in the not too distant future. This is for people that subscribe in particular to that services. So we are going to let the audience know about that soon enough as well. Well, that's all the time that we have left for this edition. We thank you so much for listening. For my father Jesus, this has been Gio. Until the next occasion that we meet, may the Lord shine his face upon you.